I wanted to talk about what I consider to be the best scene in Baldur's Gate 3.
Been trapped in that coffin with no one but a mad rider and my own farts for company.
Let me tell you why. Listen, I love RPGs. I love games that have a heavy emphasis on narrative structure, on story and character progression. Games that have complex world building, especially narratives that are shaped by player choice. These kinds of games are just so fascinating to me, both from the consumer/player perspective, because they're just plain fun and have a lot of replayability, but also from the game development/writing aspect. It's incredibly difficult to craft a story where the player feels like they are making tangible choices that heavily influence the world with which they are interacting, but also to balance that out by converging different paths where necessary, to keep every player on relatively the same progression through the game in terms of pacing, no matter the choices that they've taken. So I wanted to talk about one of my favorite scenes in Baldur's Gate 3, specifically in terms of choice branching. I'm talking about the Moon Lantern ambush scene, or more broadly, the sequence of events where you are searching for protection from the Shadowkers at the beginning of Act 2. So I wanted to look at that, isolated from the rest of the game, and just kind of dissect it, contextualize it, and to see what makes it stand out so much to me. Because choice-based narratives are fascinating, but they often face the challenge of creating the illusion of choice. They can often kind of fall victim to this quote-unquote omission of content disguised as a player choice problem. What I mean is sometimes what seems like a big decision, for example, going left instead of right, actually just changes whether you encounter a boss or avoid them altogether. One path is full of content while the other isn't. That's not branching, it's just skipping over content. And Baldur's Gate 3, while it's an amazing game with an amazing narrative that I could talk about endlessly, occasionally falls into this trap too. But the Moon Lantern ambush sequence in Act 2 is just a masterclass in doing branching right, okay? In my opinion, of course. Every choice feels meaningful. Every outcome has weight, and most importantly, the options are equal to one another. No matter which path you take, the narrative complexity and emotional impact are there. And I don't mean that the rest of the story in this game is bad by any means. This specific style of scene composition and writing just stands out to me because it is so good, not because the rest of the story is bad, obviously. And that's why I wanted to look at this specific scene. It's one of my favorite parts of the game, simply because the branching is so good. It's not the only instance of this in the game, but this one just really stands out to me. And I just like to imagine if we had infinite resources to make a game that is entirely comprised of complex branching scenes like this, how far could we push this genre? How far could we push RPGs like Baldur's Gate 3? It's really fun to think about it, how replayable a game like this can be and how it can create an entirely different experience every time you play it. So let me explain. Let's get into it. The first choice that heavily impacts the sequence of events that unfold is where we enter into the Shadow-Cursed lands from. That being either through the Underdark or through the Mountain Pass. When we enter through the Mountain Pass, we are first met with this goblin, and it seems as though this goblin was instructed by someone to expect a true soul to arrive through here. They also advise us to take a torch for at least some protection against the Shadow Curse. If we, on the other hand, enter from the Underdark, dark, we are instead met with a few harpers that help us fight these shadow creatures that have attacked us in the dark. And right off the bat, I love that the difference here is not determined by some previous choice that we have made, but rather the location that we enter this area from. It adds this sort of additional layer of complexity to the overall experience of this sequence of events, because for example, we can play a good character, but just because we entered from the mountain pass, we now have to be friendly with the bad guys, you know, the absolute cultist whose allies we just killed, and now we need to fraternize with them to essentially not die in the dark and ensure our own survival. And vice versa, we can play an evil character that sided with Minthara and the goblins, someone that slaughtered an entire grove of innocents that is now being rescued by these hospitable good guys who think we might be a hero that will help them, and we need to play nice because we don't know how to traverse the Shadow-Cursed lands on our own. It's really interesting how the personality of our character and our previous choices influence how we feel or how we perceive our character would feel throughout the sequence of events, and I'll touch more on that at the end. But this really captures the role-playing aspect of RPGs for me. The Shadow-Cursed lands really make you feel uneasy, disoriented, creeped out. You get this air of dread and desperation in the air. It feels so dreadful and empty and silently dark, but at the same time creepy, like you're being watched. And because of that, this sequence of choices really immerses you into your own character. It pulls you into the game like you are there. In both instances, with the Harpers or with the caravan, the game literally shows us that the stakes are high. We get to see what the Shadow Curse does to living beings, no matter if we are malicious, kind, or just a bystander. It's made known to the player that the stakes are high and we seriously need to find something to protect us from the darkness, otherwise our mission here is impossible. It really makes you think, what do I do here just to survive, regardless of my, or more correctly of course, my character's morality. And this scene is just so terrifying.
There you are. Come, join me.
Jonas. And the same goes for how creepy this scene makes you feel.
Wait, you're joking, yeah? So you want me to... I mean, I'll just go and... No! No!
Oh, come on. It gives me shivers every time I enter into the Shadow-Cursed lands for the first time in a playthrough. And what I love about this is that it's not established only through cutscenes or dialogue, but also through the game mechanics. I mean, the game literally puts you into turn-based mode if you venture too far into the darkness, and it is literally near impossible to traverse the Shadow-Cursed lands because you get this Shadow Curse condition where you take necrotic damage every turn, and this keeps doubling and doubling and doubling every turn you are standing in the Shadow Curse, which again makes it seem even more real, even more immersive. So let's start with the Goblin Caravan POV first. Here we take a torch and head to the absolute cultists that are waiting for some true soul because they have been tasked with escorting them to the towers.
You're the true soul we're taking to Moonrise, I'm guessing.
We were told to expect a true soul. that Night Warden Minthara would send someone with her lyre to summon a guide through the darkness.
We procure the lyre and summon the druida Canis and go on our merry way towards the Moonrise Towers. When meandering about the creepy environment, we come across this dilapidated wooden building, and our characters can either recognize that we're about to walk into an ambush or not. Regardless, the absolute caravan is ambushed by these harpers that we have not really encountered before at this point of the game. If we side with the goblin caravan here, we just simply dispose of the harpers and move on. It is definitely worth mentioning here that all of the harpers have this Blessing of Selûne buff on them, and after the whole ordeal is finished, a DC 14 Arcana check can be passed to confirm this to our character.
You notice something odd on the fallen soldier. A faint glow about the face, like an aura fast fading. You can feel the power it held. Weak, but still divine. These soldiers were protected from the shadows by a blessing of Selûne.
Canis leads us to the towers, where he scales the tower and disappears. We can find other members of the caravan just kind of lounging about the towers after the fact. We love the attention to detail. We are instructed by Zarel to grab a moon lantern from Balthazar's room.
The shadows around the mausoleum are deep and hungry. You'll need a moon lantern to survive them. Take one from Balthazar's chambers.
That moon lantern, however, does not function the same, as in you don't get the pixie bell from it. And Canis is actually just chilling atop the towers as well. Also, considering the Dungeons and Dragons lore of Lothsworn Drow, this line just feels so sad.
Cast no longer. I will ascend.
Now let's rewind a little bit. If we instead go against the caravan, betray the cultists and side with the harpers, we of course kill the caravan and Canis. Before we grab the moon lantern for ourselves, the harpers pick it up and question us about betraying those who seem to be our allies. And again, we are faced with a choice. Do we then turn on the harpers because they refuse to give us the lantern, or do we trust them, comply, and follow them to Last Light Inn? Now, the former is pretty self-explanatory. We kill the harpers and loot the moon lantern off them and make a deal with the pixie.
Lantern gives off a chilly glow.
Finally!
The latter is obviously different. We instead go with the harpers to Last Light Inn, and the moon lantern is transported to Isabel. Side note, I really wanted to know what happens if you loot the lantern from Canis's body before the cutscene starts. And it just plays out more or less the same. The harpers want you to give them the lantern before proceeding, so again you can either fight them to keep it or surrender it. In Last Light Inn, the same as in the Moonrise Towers, once again we get to see the harpers we fought with just kind of lounging about Last Light Inn. Also, the harpers mourning Jonas, you know, the harper we witness being taken by the shadows if we enter from the Underdark instead, are also there. Oh my god, the attention to detail here. It really feels like we are existing in and impacting a world that feels alive. Like this harper expedition still happened and it left an emotional consequence on these characters even though we weren't there to see it. So Jaheira instructs us to talk to Isabel.
She cast the moon shield around the inn. It's the only reason we're still alive. She's upstairs in her chambers. Tell her I sent you, and she'll see you through the shadows safely.
Isabel gives us both the Selûne buff as well as the moon lantern. But before freeing the pixie, we also have to go through the fight sequence with the traitor Flaming Fist, Marcus. And after everything's done, we get the pixie.
Finally!
Now, let's go to the completely other perspective. We enter the Shadowkissed lands through the elevator in the Underdark. we traverse the darkness on our own, and we come across these harpers walking in the dark. We are attacked by these shadow creatures, and Harper Jonas is lost to the curse. But when the encounter is over, we go to Last Light Inn with them. Jahira sends us to Isabel. She then gives us a lesser protection against the curse. Isabel also mentions that the Harpers are trying to figure out how the absolute cultists are able to repel the shadow curse even where it's really strong. We have to do the whole Isabel Marcus sequence. Isabel gives us the blessing of Seluna, the same one that the Harpers have during the ambush, so we can kind of imagine that just as we have just prepared to venture into the dark, so did the Harpers before we defeated them, if we are sided with the absolute caravan in the opposite version of the ambush scene that we discussed before. When approaching the entrance to Last Light Inn, we are intercepted by the Harpers, saying that they've received orders to help us find some sort of repellent for the shadow curse.
The cultists have found a way to move freely. Whatever this method, you must claim it.
I also thought it was interesting that Lysandra actually joins the ambush in this POV. Now this is the part that really stayed with me. Why I even wanted to make this video. Because you really get to experience the complete opposite POV of this scene here. In this cutscene, you are completely on the other side. You are hiding with the Harpers in the same way that they are hiding, preparing to ambush you if you are with the Goblin Caravan. I honestly didn't expect this to be a thing. I very much thought this ambush scene was kind of like the Grove fight at the beginning of the game, for example. As in, it happens the same way regardless of everything else. So I thought the ambush scene is the same every time you enter the Shadow Curse lands as well. For me, for example, when I first played, I entered from the mountain pass, so I thought you always start with the Goblin Caravan, and then when the fight breaks out, you choose who you side with, which is already a good scene in and of itself. But no, here you are completely on the other side in the exact same scene. The brilliance of this lies in how it kind of flips the script entirely when played from the opposite perspective. Larian really didn't have to flex their writing skills this hard, but thank God that they did. So here again, we have this choice of either betraying our Harper allies, at which point we are then escorted to the towers like I went over before, or we side with the Harpers, defeating the caravan and taking the moon lantern. However, in this instance, because we have approached this ambush with the Harpers as our allies, they let us, even encourage us to take the lantern for ourselves.
Take the lantern from the Drider. You've earned it.
Finally! Been trapped in that coffin with no one but a mad rider and my own farts for company.
However, in the Harper POV, we get additional things we can do, which is using our charisma skills to persuade the Drider to just relinquish the lantern and walk into the shadows without protection, which is honestly really grim. This scene feels so gut-wrenching and sad, and once again I just love the writing in this game. These characters feel so human, so real. Like, even though siding with the absolute caravan is more of an evil choice here, when you watch this scene, hear the desperation and fear in their voices.
Majesty, is this true? Did I not serve you well?
We can't go without you. The shadows would tear us to pieces. You can't be serious. You know what's out there.
She will protect us. She must.
It makes you question whether sending them into the dark was a good call, even though in hindsight you did the right thing, avoided violence and protected your allies. The environment is not just a passive backdrop, it's an active participant. It's not just us against the cultists or us against the Harpers, it's every living being against the deadly shadow curse. This sequence of events just really stayed with me. The fact that the game delivers both sides of this ambush so fully, down to the dialogue and the cutscenes, it gives it almost a cinematic quality to it. It turns what could have been a simple fight into this kind of multi-layered experience that mirrors perspectives in a way that feels almost movie-esque. Each side feels fleshed out, alive, and equally significant. And this duality is just so clever. It's deeply immersive and it makes you feel like you're seeing out two different stories converging in the same important pivotal moment, and you can be on either side of them. It really feels like the game understands player agency in this very moment. Also, if the caravan was sent into the darkness, it can actually be found later on as shadow-cursed undead. Even this in and of itself is so interesting to me, that through dialogue options, we influence what group of enemies we encounter later on when exploring Rithwin Town. They could have just as easily disappeared into the shadows and poof out of existence, but no, we actually have to fight them here. Kind of the same as how we have to fight the shadow hyena and the goblin if we told him to walk into the dark. I don't know, it adds this element of this horrible uneasiness of this environment. It really feels like these choices have heavy consequence to them because we are literally faced with the monsters we created by sending our enemies into the darkness. I mean, at the end, this is what choice-based RPGs are all about. This interplay of narrative complexity, player agency, and meaningful choices and their consequences all come together here in a way that's really memorable. The game truly shows respect to its players, letting us truly inhabit our character and forge our own story. This series of choices really captures the essence of role-playing, forcing you to reckon with your characters' fight for survival, but also their morality or even just their pragmatism. Are you just playing along, fraternizing with the cultists despite your disdain for their methods? Or are you above everything, striving to always do good, even if it might put you in danger? Are you a villain, having to rely on the help of those you see as weak or naive? Or maybe you just started as evil but are now on a path to redemption, or vice versa? Or are you just a self-serving anti-hero going over anything and everyone that stands in your way in order to survive or to get what you want? This is where the writing of this scene really shines. The possibilities are truly endless, which pulls you into the complex mindset of your character. As I said before, the environment is an active participant and the moon lantern is the key to conquering it. So siding with whoever has the lantern to ensure your own survival can persuade you to turn against your allies despite the morality of your previous choices. Hopefully I've managed to explain what I mean, but to me this is the charm of choice-based storytelling in RPGs contained in this relatively short sequence of events. This is why I love this genre of game, and I hope to see more of this in future games like this. Tell me if any specific scenes stood out to you the way this scene did to me, and very much thank you for listening.